Femi, are you out of your senses? Do you want to disgrace me? The roar from Chief Okonkwo echoed across the marble veranda, sharp enough to cut through the humid Lagos air. Femi, his gardener of 15 years, flinched, his hands freezing on the shears. Today was the day of the chief's only daughter's traditional wedding. Hundreds of Lagos's most powerful elite, politicians, oil magnates, and rival chiefs, were set to arrive in hours. The centerpiece of the event was not the bride. It was Chief Okonkwo's lawn. It was a sprawling carpet of impossible emerald green, a defiant miracle wrestled from the tropical climate, a testament to his wealth and power. It was Femi's life's work. Chief, dressed in a glistening white agbada, jabbed a jewel-encrusted finger toward the ground. "What is this?" he hissed, his voice trembling with rage. Femi squinted. He saw nothing but perfection. "Sir? I don't." "This." Okonkwo stepped forward and kicked at the grass, revealing a tiny, almost invisible patch of yellowing blades, no bigger than a Naira coin. It was a spot where a champagne glass had likely been dropped during last night's setup. "Are you blind? This is what my enemies will see. They will say, Okonkwo cannot even control his own grass." "Oga, please." Femi began, his heart sinking. "It is just a small burn from the sun. I can patch it in minutes." "Minutes? Minutes is too late," the chief bellowed. "This is incompetence. After 15 years of eating my money, you bring me this shame, this insult." Femi, a man who had nurtured every blade of grass as if it were his own child, felt the blood drain from his face. He knew in that instant that this was not about the grass. It was about something far more brittle, his master's pride. Femi scrambled to his feet, his knees dusty. "Oga, please, it's the wedding stress. Give me 1 minute." He was already moving toward the small yellow patch, ready to perform surgery on the lawn. "Stop!" Okonkwo's voice was no longer a roar. It was a low, dangerous hiss. This was the voice he used in the boardroom just before he destroyed a competitor. "You think that is the only problem? You think I am blind?" He began to pace along the pristine white walkway, his hands clasped behind his back, inspecting every leaf, every petal. Femi followed a few feet behind, his heart pounding a desperate rhythm against his ribs. The chief was hunting now, looking for a reason to unleash the storm of his anger. He passed the perfect hibiscus hedge. He ignored the blood-red ixora. He marched straight toward the massive, ornate planters filled with imported white roses that flanked the grand entrance. These were his pride. The flowers he boasted had been flown in from Kenya. And then he stopped. He stood perfectly still, his broad shoulders tensing. Femi's eyes followed the chief's gaze, and his stomach turned to water. There, nestled at the base of a pristine white rose bush, was a single defiant flower. It was not white. It was not a rose. It was a bright, almost vulgar orange marigold. A common flower, the kind that grew wild on the roadside, a bigiri-colored stain on his canvas of pure white. "Femi," the chief said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "What is that?" "Oga, it's just... a bird must have dropped the seed. The rain," Femi stammered. "A bird," Chief Okonkwo repeated, turning to face his gardener. A cold, flat smile spread across his face. "You stand there, 15 years eating my food, and you blame a bird for this abomination? This poverty." He saw the marigold as a personal insult, a symbol of the common street sullying his magnificent estate. This was the true failure. Femi rushed forward, his hands outstretched as if to shield the chief from the sight of the offensive flower. "Oga, please, I will pull it out. It will take only 1 second, sir. No one will ever know." "No." Okonkwo slapped Femi's hands away with a sharp, brutal motion. "I know. That is what matters. I pay for perfection, not for excuses about birds and rain. He pointed a shaking finger, his gold ring flashing in the morning sun, moving from Femi to the flower and back again. This is not a mistake. This is a sign. It is a sign of your carelessness, your incompetence. The word hung in the humid air, heavy and final. For 15 years, I have trusted you with the face of my home. Okonkwo seethed, his eyes boring into Femi. And on the most important day, the day my daughter marries into the Adelik family, this is what you present to me? A roadside weed? A shame? Do you want them to laugh at me? Do you want them to say, Okonkwo's house is run by a village fool who plants marigolds? No, Oga. God forbid. Femi fell to his knees, his palms pressed together in the traditional sign of begging. Please, Oga, my daughter, my little Bola. She is sick. The fever. The hospital bills. I need this job, sir. Please, don't do this to me. The mention of his daughter, the desperate plea, only hardened the chief's face. He saw it as a distraction, a pathetic excuse for this unforgivable failure. Your child's sickness is not my concern, Okonkwo said, his voice dropping to ice. My concern is my reputation. My concern is the disgrace you have brought to my gate. He straightened his magnificent agbada, pulling his authority around him like a shroud. You are finished here. Get your things. You're fired. The words "you're fired" echoed in the sudden, terrible silence. Femi's plea for his daughter died in his throat. He remained on his knees, stunned, the world tilting. Oga, no. Please, Ijo. Femi finally stammered, trying to scramble forward, to hold onto the hem of the chief's flowing agbada in a final, desperate appeal. Okonkwo recoiled, his face a mask of disgust. Tund. Musa, get this rubbish out of my sight. Now. 2 uniformed security guards, men Femi had shared jokes with only yesterday, materialized from the side of the house. Their faces were grim. Femi, stand up. Tund, the older one, said quietly, his voice full of pity. Oga has spoken. You have to go. My things, my daughter's picture. Femi whispered, but they were already lifting him by the arms. They didn't just walk him. They half-dragged him, a public spectacle for the other staff who now watched from windows, their eyes wide with fear. They bypassed the small boy's quarters he and his family had called home for 15 years. He wouldn't even be allowed to say goodbye to his wife. They marched him straight to the towering, gilded front gates. Clang, click. The heavy iron gate was slammed and locked, sealing him out. Femi stood on the dusty roadside, dazed, the Lagos traffic roaring past him like a bad dream. Ibrahim, the head of security, appeared on the other side of the bars. He didn't meet Femi's eyes. He pushed a thin, crumpled envelope through the gap. Chief said, "This is your final pay." Femi's hands trembled as he opened it. Inside were a few thousand naira notes. Not his month's salary. Not his severance. Just his pay up to that very morning. He said the marigold was an insult, Ibrahim muttered, then turned and walked away. Femi was alone, locked out. On the most important day of the chief's life, he was penniless on the street, and from over the high wall, he could hear the sound of the High Life band starting to play. The music from the party, a joyous High Life tune, was a cruel slap in the face. Femi stood by the roadside, the thin envelope clutched in his hand, the Lagos traffic a chaotic blur. Horns blared. A Danfo bus conductor yelled at him to get out of the way. He was invisible. It took him an hour to walk to the small gate at the back of the compound that led to the boys' quarters. 2 was locked. He had to bang on the metal for 10 minutes before his wife, Funk, opened it, her eyes wide with terror. "They came," she whispered, her voice breaking. "The head of security. He said we have 1 hour. 1 hour. Femi, what did you do?" He walked past her into their single room, a space he had always kept spotless. It was in chaos. Ghana must-go bags, bulging with their meager belongings, lay on the floor. On the small mat in the corner lay their daughter, Bola. She was shivering despite the heat, her small face slick with sweat. Femi touched her forehead. It was burning. Bola, omo me. The fever is worse, Funk said, tears streaming down her face. I was going to ask Oga for an advance today for the hospital. Femi, what did you do? He looked at the pitiful sum of money in the envelope. It wasn't enough for the hospital. It wasn't even enough for a deposit on a new room. Chief Okonkwo hadn't just fired him. He had rendered him homeless and left his child to die. From over the wall, a roar of laughter and applause erupted from the wedding guests. Femi sank onto a stool, the weight of the last hour crushing him. He, a master gardener, a man of skill and loyalty, was now a beggar with a sick child, cast out over a single harmless flower. This was not a job loss. This was an execution. Femi, we must go now. Funk's voice was sharp with panic. The pounding at their door was no longer polite. It was the sound of authority, impatient and cold. They will throw our things into the street. Femi stared at his sick daughter, his mind a blank wall of despair. Where could they go? The nearest hospital was private. They would demand a deposit he couldn't pay. A public hospital was miles away, and Bola might not survive the journey in a packed Malu bus. He was frozen, trapped by his own powerlessness. Funk, seeing his paralysis, acted. With tears of rage in her eyes, she zipped the last Ghana must-go bag. She snatched the pitiful envelope from Femi's hand and then, with a determined grunt, knelt and lifted the edge of the worn sleeping mat where Bola had been lying. Her fingers fumbled for a loose floor tile. She pried it open, revealing a small, hollow space. From inside, she pulled a tightly knotted black nylon bag. Funk, what is this? Femi whispered. Her hands trembled as she untied the knots, revealing a small, precious hoard of wrinkled Naira notes and a cascade of coins. It is my market money, she whispered, refusing to meet his eyes. What I saved. From the soup money Oga gives me. A little from the gari, a little from the fish. I was saving it for Bola's school uniform, for her books for primary one. It wasn't a fortune. It was the painfully slow accumulation of a mother's sacrifice. But combined with the chief's insulting pay, it was something. It was survival. It is not enough for the hospital, Funk wept. Femi looked at the small pile of money, then at his wife's tear-streaked face. A spark ignited in the cold emptiness of his chest. This money was not from the chief. It was theirs. Earned. Saved. No, Femi said, his voice hoarse. He gently lifted Bola, wrapping her in their last good blanket. It is enough for the bus, and it is enough for the Agbo woman. We will go to my aunt's village. The journey to his aunt's village in Ogun State was a blur of diesel fumes and suffocating heat in a crowded Danfo. They arrived like refugees, Funk clutching Bola, Femi carrying the Ghana must-go bags, his pride in tatters. His Auntie Yemisi, a frail woman with kind eyes, took them in. She had little, a 2-room mud-brick house and a small patch of land out back. She offered them 1 room and her prayers. Funk's saved coins went immediately to the village Ilu Omo, the old herbalist, who brewed bitter concoctions of dogonyaro leaves and roots. For 2 agonizing days, Bola lay on a mat, shivering. On the 3rd morning, her fever broke. She cried, not a weak whimpering, but a hungry, angry wail. Funk and Femi wept with relief. But once the terror passed, shame took its place. Femi, a man of skill, was now jobless, living on an old woman's charity. He walked the small, sun-baked patch of land behind the house. The soil was red and hard-packed, stubborn. It was nothing like the soft, dark loam of the chief's estate. In a trash heap by the fence, where Funk had thrown yam peels, he saw it. A single tomato seed sprouted from the refuse, its two tiny leaves pushing defiantly toward the sun. A nobody's seed. Femi stared at it. He too was in the trash heap. He gently dug out the tiny plant with his bare hands. He found a broken calabash, filled it with better soil from the base of a tree, and planted the seedling. He placed it in the one spot of morning sun by their doorway. It was a pathetic, tiny thing, but it was his, and it was alive. Back in Lagos, Chief Okonkwo sipped his morning coffee, a blend flown in from Ethiopia. He was reading the society pages. His daughter's wedding was the talk of the town, a display of unparalleled class. One columnist gushed. He smiled. The Adelik family was impressed, and a new, massive contract between the two families was already being drafted. The tiny yellow patch and the offensive marigold were forgotten, buried under the feet of hundreds of guests. His new gardener, a young, desperate man hired that very morning, was already at work, aggressively spraying chemicals on the lawn to keep it a uniform, artificial green. The man had none of Femi's gentle skill, none of his feel for the soil. He was all brute force and pesticides. Chief Okonkwo didn't care, as long as the results were instant. He had, in fact, already forgotten Femi's name. The man was just the gardener, a failed component easily replaced. The chief's mind was on a far bigger prize. He was in the final stages of a hostile takeover of a rival's oil logistics company. It was a brutal, merciless campaign. He was leveraging his entire fortune, cutting deals in smoky backrooms, and preparing to liquidate assets and fire hundreds of workers. He felt the familiar thrill of the kill, the surge of power that came from crushing an opponent. He looked out at his perfect, sterile lawn. The wedding had been a victory. This deal would be another. He felt invincible, a king in his concrete castle. He had no idea that the soil his new gardener was poisoning was already beginning to sour, the roots of his prized grasses turning brittle and weak. Femi poured his entire, broken soul into that one seedling. It was the only thing he could control. He protected it from the harsh sun and scavenging chickens, watering it with precious water from his aunt's well. The plant didn't just survive. It thrived. It was as if it recognized the hands of a master. It yielded a small batch of the richest, reddest tomatoes the village had seen in years. Femi saved every seed. With the discipline of his old life, he attacked his aunt's stubborn backyard plot. He didn't have chemicals or imported fertilizers. He had only his hands, his knowledge, and dogonjaro leaves, which he crushed to make a natural pesticide. He built compost from their food scraps. He worked from dawn until the sun drove him indoors. Soon, a small, vibrant patch of green emerged from the red earth. Tomatoes, fiery atarodo, Scotch bonnets, and lush efo, spinach. Funk took their first tiny harvest to the village market. Beside the massive, watery tomatoes trucked in from the north, Femi's looked small, but they glowed with health. A woman known as Aya Elewa, who ran the most popular buka, food stall, for travelers on the main road, stopped. She picked up a tomato, smelled it, and her eyes widened. "This one, it smells like my mother's own," she murmured. She bought his entire basket. The next market day, she was waiting for them. "My customers are asking what I did to my stew," she exclaimed. "They say the taste has returned. I don't want you selling to anyone else. Bring everything you grow. Everything. Only to me." It wasn't a Lagos contract signed in an air-conditioned office. It was a handshake in the dust, sealed with the respect of one professional for another. It was barely enough money to feed them, but as Femi looked at his thriving patch, he felt it, the first, tiny seedling of hope. While Femi was coaxing life from the red earth, the foundations of Chief Okonkwo's empire were cracking. The unshakable global oil market, the source of all his power, suddenly nosedived. Prices plummeted overnight, catching the overleveraged and arrogant completely off guard. Okonkwo's hostile takeover, which he had financed by borrowing heavily against his every asset, became a millstone around his neck. The logistics company he had bought was now worth less than half of what he'd paid, and his creditors, the banks, the international partners, all wanted their money at once. The calls started. At first, he barked at his secretaries, refusing to take them. Then the letters came, marked urgent. Finally, the men in sharp suits arrived, their faces polite but their eyes cold as steel. His empire was dismantled with terrifying speed. The bank seized the mansion. The fleet of cars, the Mercedes, the Range Rover, the Lexus, was repossessed. His accounts were frozen. The Adelik family, seeing the blood in the water, quietly canceled the new contract. Okonkwo, the man who couldn't tolerate a single marigold, was forced to stand by and watch as strangers in court-ordered suits tagged his furniture, his art, his wife's jewelry. Within 6 months, he was gone. He and his wife moved into a small, rented 2-bedroom flat in Surulere, a place he once would have bulldozed. The man who had fired Femi for incompetence had to sell his prized Rolex just to pay the deposit. He was no longer chief. He was just Alistair Okonkwo, a man drowning in a wall of debt. 20 years. In Lagos, 20 years is a lifetime. Governments change, skylines transform, and fortunes are made and lost in the blink of an eye. For Alistair Okonkwo, those 20 years were a slow, grinding descent into obscurity. His wife, unable to cope with the shame and poverty, had moved in with her sister in America and never returned. He was just Mr. Okonkwo now, a gaunt, bitter old man shuffling through the crowded markets of Surulere, his faded buba a testament to a forgotten era. He survived on a tiny, unreliable pension from a company he'd sat on the board of decades ago. The world, which had once bowed to him, now didn't even see him. He was a ghost, haunted by the memory of his own power. For Femi, those 20 years were a slow, steady climb. He never returned to Lagos. He had no desire to. The village in Ogun State became his new home. From that first contract with Aya Elowazbuka, his reputation grew. People didn't just want his tomatoes. They wanted his knowledge. They wanted to know how he brought dead soil back to life without chemicals, how he made plants thrive in the harsh sun. He started a small cooperative. He taught local farmers his methods of natural pest control and soil enrichment. He taught them discipline and quality. He treated the earth with the love and respect Chief Okonkwo had reserved only for his own reflection. For 2 decades, their paths never crossed. The name Okonkwo was a scar on Femi's heart, one he never spoke of, and in Okonkwo's mind, the gardener he'd fired might as well have vanished from the face of the earth. The silence between their two worlds was absolute. The small cooperative Femi started with a single tomato seedling was now an empire. It was called Omo Soil Organics, and its name was a stamp of quality and integrity across West Africa. It was no longer just a small farm. Omo Soil was a sprawling network of farms, training centers, and processing units. Femi had proven that his sustainable, natural methods weren't just village farming. They were better. They produced richer, healthier crops, and they healed the land instead of poisoning it. His client list was a who's who of Lagos's elite. The Eco Hotel, the Wheat Baker, and every high-end restaurant that prided itself on farm-to-table dining. His fleet of green and white refrigerated trucks was a common sight on the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. Femi himself was no longer just Femi. He was Otunba Femi, a respected chief and a powerful voice in agriculture, consulted by state governments and international NGOs. He was a wealthy man, but his wealth was quiet, rooted in the earth. His headquarters, built on the very land his Auntie Yemisi had given him, was not a cold glass tower. It was a sprawling, beautiful campus built from local materials, powered by solar, and surrounded by lush demonstration gardens. And running the complex logistics, the very heart of the company, was his daughter, Bola. The child who had almost died from fever now held an MBA from Ibadan and was the sharp, respected COO of the entire empire. Femi, a man once fired for incompetence, had built a legacy. Alistair Okonkwo, now 75, gaunt and gray, stared at the pink sheet of paper nailed to his door. The ink was starting to run in the humid Lagos air. Final notice of eviction. He was living in a single stifling room in a crowded face me I face you compound in Ajigunal, a far cry from his Surulere flat, which he had lost 5 years prior. His pension had been swallowed by a bad investment scheme, a final, desperate gamble to reclaim his status. Now he was just Papa, the quiet, bitter old man in room for whom everyone avoided. The landlord, a fat, chewing stick-wielding man, had been banging on his door at 5 a.m. Papa, your time is up. I am not running charity here. By Friday, I want you out. Okonkwo tore the notice from the door, his hands trembling with a weak, impotent rage. Friday. That was 2 days away. He had nowhere to go. His daughter, long since divorced from the Adelic son, was struggling in London and barely spoke to him. He was facing the ultimate, unthinkable shame. He, Chief Alistair Okonkwo, would be thrown onto the streets like a common beggar. Despair, cold and absolute, settled over him. He looked at his hands, no longer soft, but chapped and thin. Pride was a luxury he could no longer afford. He had to find work. Any work. He remembered the old gateman at his compound was looking for a new newspaper. He shuffled to the vendor's stall, his eyes scanning the pages for situations vacant, his gaze falling on the menial jobs he had once despised. Cleaner wanted, driver needed, and then, one that made his heart stop, gardener wanted. Omosoil Organics Campus, Ogun State, accommodation provided. Gardener. The universe was mocking him, but it also said, accommodation. Omosoil Organics. The name meant nothing to Alistair Okonkwo. It was just a name, but accommodation provided was a lifeline. It was a roof. It was survival. He, who once commanded boardrooms, felt a hot, sickening wave of shame. A gardener. He was applying for the very job he had stripped from that man. All those years ago, he couldn't even remember his name. He used the last of his money, not for food, but for an hour at a hot, clattering cyber cafe down the street. The young man managing the place, his ears plugged with Afrobeats, barely looked up. Okonkwo had to ask for help to create an email address. CV. He hadn't written one in 50 years. He opened a new document, his hands, spotted with age, trembling on the sticky keyboard. What could he write? CEO? Okonkwo Holdings. Defunct? Owner? Lagos Mansion. Seized? He settled on a single, pathetic line. Experience. Property and grounds management, private estate. Felt like swallowing ash. He clicked Submit on the simple online form and walked out into the harsh sun, feeling hollowed out. 2 agonizing days passed. It was Thursday night. The eviction was tomorrow. He was folding his last 2 shirts into a Ghana must-go bag when his cheap, second-hand phone buzzed. An unknown number. Hello? His voice was a dry croak. A crisp, professional woman's voice answered. Good morning. Am I speaking to Mr. Alistair Okonkwo? Yes. Yes, this is he. My name is Bola, from the HR department at Omosoil. We received your application. We were impressed with your stated experience. The Otunba himself would like to see you in person. Can you come to our campus in Ogun State tomorrow? Impressed? He almost laughed. Yes, he whispered, clutching the phone. Yes, I will be there. Okonkwo spent his last naira on the cramped, rattling bus and the final Okada ride that took him to the Omosoil campus. It wasn't a fortress of high walls and gilded gates like his old mansion. It was an open, sprawling paradise of lush green fields, blossoming trees, and the clean, rich smell of living earth. He was led, trembling and awed, to the administrative building, a beautiful structure of wood and glass. The woman from the phone, Bola, greeted him. She was sharp, elegant, and radiated a calm authority. "Mr. Okonkwo, thank you for coming. The Otunba is waiting." She led him through an office humming with quiet industry and onto a wide veranda overlooking a breathtaking garden. A man stood looking out, his back to them, wearing a simple but clearly expensive buba. "Otunba, he is here," Bola said. The man turned. Alistair Okonkwo's heart stopped. The blood drained from his face. It was Femi. He was older, his face lined with wisdom, but his eyes were the same, steady and clear. He was not the kneeling, begging man from 20 years ago. He was a king. "Femi," Okonkwo whispered, his voice catching. "It is you." "Mr. Okonkwo," Femi replied, his voice level, holding neither hatred nor warmth, only peace. "And I," the young woman beside him said, her voice sharp as glass, "am Bola, the daughter whose fever you didn't care about." The old man's legs gave way. Okonkwo collapsed onto the polished floor, the full, crushing weight of his life crashing down on him. He was at their feet, a broken, homeless beggar. "Please," he wept, his voice a ragged whisper. "I have nothing. I am finished. Ijo, forgive me. I will sweep your floors." Femi looked at the weeping man for a long, silent moment. Then he looked at Bola, who gave a single, slow nod. "We have an opening," Femi said quietly, "for a gardener. The accommodation is a single room in the staff quarters. You will report to the grounds manager at 6 a.m. tomorrow." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Your first task will be the marigold beds. We find they are excellent for the soil." And so, the man who once threw a loyal servant out over a single flower now spends his final days tending them. A living testament that pride is a short path to disgrace. This story teaches us that the hand you use to push someone down today may be the same hand you have to beg from tomorrow. No condition is permanent, and true wealth is not in what you own, but in the character you build and the kindness you show. Thank you for watching through. Hey, I'm curious. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. Also, what lesson did you take from the story of Femi and Chief Okonkwo? You can as well drop your thoughts in the comments. I read all comments. And if this story touched your heart, please help our channel grow. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell so you never miss another story.